folks. The US has just struck Iran in response to essentially Iranian attacks against commercial vessels. US CENTCOM, US Central Command, has just made the announcement. So I decided, I'm just going to go live to basically cover this and discuss this. This is actually basically what I expected, because I said the only way the ceasefire or so-called peace deal was going to last is if essentially President Trump was very committed to surrendering to the Ayatollahs. And the reason I said this was because we're looking at Iran, which is essentially not willing to compromise. They're not willing to compromise on the ballistic missiles. They're not willing to compromise on their nuclear program. They're not willing to also compromise on essentially the proxies, Hezbollah and others in the region. So what we're looking at is basically Iran choosing not to compromise and choosing to escalate and choosing to also maintain, the upper hand in the Strait of Hormuz. So they want to basically be the party that decides, when to close traffic and essentially block the Strait of Hormuz. So they're not willing to compromise on this. So again, this is not something, I've said this before, this is not something that's acceptable to anyone. It's not acceptable to the US. It's not acceptable to the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, UAE, everyone else. And it's not acceptable to even Europe. So what we saw happening tonight is essentially a response to this. We have seen that the US decided, the Iranian attack on commercial vessels is basically unacceptable. And they needed to respond to it because, let's face it, you just have to respond. You cannot not respond to this kind of thing. So I just want to show you just want to show you the statement from CENTCOM. There we go. So we see U.S. strikes Iran in response to attack on commercial vessels. Well, commercial vessel. And here we go. Sorry, that's just my face. You don't want to see that. So there we go. This was just posted almost half an hour ago. And we see here U.S. strikes Iran in response to attack on commercial vessels, Tampa, Florida. U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM forces conducted strikes against Iran June 26 as a powerful response to yesterday's attack on a commercial ship that was transiting the Strait of Hormuz. So the expectation was actually that, you needed to be able to open the Strait of Hormuz. This was the main condition. This was actually far more important to the US and everyone else in the region, because this shows whether Iran is taking this seriously or not, whether Iran is committing to whether they're committing to the ceasefire or not. And this is the immediate thing that they need to do. So, the whole idea of, ballistic missiles, nuclear armament, or the proxies is something that needs to be done over the medium to long term. But what needs to be done immediately is opening the Strait of Hormuz. And obviously, they're not committing to this. They're not committing to the opening of the Strait of Hormuz. Just to continue the statement, because actually I think the most important thing is the scale of the US strikes against Iran. We need to understand, the scale in terms of what the targets are, what kind of strike it was. Is it just, essentially a bit of a warning, or is it actually a serious strike? So let's continue the statement. US aircraft struck Iranian missile and drone storage locations and coastal radar sites after Iran hit MV Ever Lovely on June 25 with a one-way attack drone. The Singapore-flagged cargo ship was exiting the Strait of Hormuz along the Omani coast at the time of Iran's attack. The unwarranted aggression against commercial shipping by Iran forces clearly violated the ceasefire. Furthermore, Iran's dangerous behavior undermined navigation as commerce increasingly flows through the vital international trade corridor. CENTCOM forces continue to provide safe passage, coordination, and support to commercial vessels transiting the strait. The U.S. military remains present and vigilant to ensure all aspects of the agreement with Iran are adhered to, obeyed, and in full force and effect. Right, so let me just stop sharing because this is a bit. There we go. Right, here we go. So basically, what we're looking at, I believe, is actually quite a small attack. I wouldn't say this is, this is a huge strike. I wouldn't say this is a consequential strike. As you have seen, they're basically saying that this is, mostly targeting missile and drone storage locations. So not anything serious, nothing that belongs to the government, nothing in Tehran, nothing. It's essentially a warning that if you violate the ceasefire, we will attack, and please don't violate the ceasefire. Essentially, so it's not anything significant, if you ask me. I would say this is actually a worrying indication more than anything else because this just shows that the US is still committed to the ceasefire and is still essentially sending Iran just a warning, just a mere warning that if you continue to do this, we're going to respond. But this is tit for tat. This is not changing anything. So Iran targeted a vessel. It's actually not even tit for tat, if you ask me, because when Iran targets a vessel, this basically leads to an increase in shipping costs, which is huge. So, other vessels will be very worried about, transiting through the Strait of Hormuz, which means there will be a lot of costs involved, insurance, a lot of issues, which again doesn't serve the markets globally. Because, and that's actually what I said in an article that will be published soon, even threatening to block the Strait of Hormuz or basically promoting some sort of rumors or some sort of, essentially making people slightly worried that you might target them results in serious consequences for the Strait of Hormuz, for the global markets, because again, this is something like the stock market. If somebody sells, if somebody promotes some rumor that, a company is going bust or whatever, you see that its stock actually decreases. The price of the stock and the value of the stock decreases significantly. And this is the same case here. What we're looking at is pretty much, Iran targeting one vessel will actually lead to serious consequences for every other, company, everyone else, essentially every country in the region, and it will continue to increase the cost of oil and gas, essentially. So this is why I'm saying that the U.S. response is actually very limited. And if you ask me, I would probably say it's pathetic. To be honest, it's not a response that I would feel proud of. It's not a strong response. It's not even tit for tat because as I said, because this is Iran saying we still control the Strait of Hormuz, and all you're doing is pretty much just striking a location where some missiles and some drones are stored and some radars. It's not really significant, but I think the significance of the attack is also related to, well, mostly I would say is related to, if you ask me, I'll probably say it's related to showing an indication that this ceasefire is not holding. This ceasefire is really quite fragile, and I think, as I said before, the only way the ceasefire would be maintained, the only way the ceasefire would continue, is if President Trump is 100% committed to giving up. He does not want to continue the war or to get back to the war. So basically, he will take whatever Iran does and looks the other way. I'd love to actually have someone joining me. Let me just double check because I sent a couple of messages to a few people. And if any of you would like to join the conversation, if any of you have any questions or anything to add, please do let me know. I love having conversations like this. We used to usually have spaces, and I think I'd love to have this setting again. But primarily for me, again, as I said, I don't think this is going very well. I don't think this is. I don't think this is good for the U.S. To be honest, the attack again for me, if anything, even the language of the statement. U.S. strikes Iran in response to attack on commercial vessel. Uh, the statement is really quite weak. The statement says, the unwarranted aggression against commercial shipping by Iranian forces clearly violated the ceasefire. So I get this. Again, it's the language is really quite weak. If you ask me, it's not something that inspires confidence. It doesn't inspire confidence in the markets, obviously, because if we see this happening, And again, this was the message that President Trump actually received from the UAE. He was told explicitly that this situation cannot continue. You cannot end the war with Iran choosing to actually allow people to choosing to actually block the strait or open the strait. They cannot have this ability. You should destroy this ability, that it's no longer up to Iran. This is not part of what they can or cannot do. It's basically, you need to remove this ability. This is what President Trump was told by the UAE. But some other countries in the region, including Saudi Arabia, were actually, they don't really mind having some sort of negotiations with Iran, that Iran would open the Strait of Hormuz willingly, that they would be the ones making the decision to open the Strait of Hormuz. Uh, the UAE and others, especially researchers and analysts, myself included, I believe we need to remove the Iranian ability to block the Strait of Hormuz. I don't think President Trump is showing any indications that he's willing to do this. I don't think he's showing any indications that he is even willing to consider the seriousness of this, to be honest. But we will see, because again, now we have a serious violation. We have a serious violation that shows that President Trump is actually, that there is essentially no ceasefire. It's incredibly clear to everyone there is no ceasefire. We now have Iran choosing to target vessels transiting through the Strait of Hormuz, and we have the US targeting Iran. I think this is a step towards escalation, and I think what should be coming next is most likely, I would say, is escalation. Let's see how Iran responds, and let's see what President Trump himself says. I think he indicated today, a few tweets were interesting in the sense of, he indicated that essentially, striking Iran could be happening again soon. So I'm not really sure. We'll have to wait and see. Uh, yeah, I think again the war will start at some point. But again, thanks for joining this quick update, and I'll try my best to keep you updated. And please, if anyone would like to join my next broadcast, please feel free to do so. I love having different voices, different questions, different ideas being proposed, suggested. And I also like having my analysis scrutinized. So thank you very much for your time, and have a good evening. Bye.